The HOA slapped me with a $900 fine for parking on what they claimed was their property. At first, I figured maybe they were right. Then, I uncovered the deed. That narrow strip of grass didn't belong to the HOA at all. It was an easement. And under state law, easement rights can sometimes be legally purchased. So that's exactly what I did. After that, I turned the tables and started billing them instead. Before we go any further, I want to know where you're watching from. Leave your country in the comments. I genuinely enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Hit that subscribe button, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind of day that usually fades from memory before lunch. Except, this one never would. When I stepped outside, I noticed a bright yellow envelope taped across the windshield of my truck. HOA violation notice. Amount due, $900. The explanation was almost laughable. According to the notice, I'd parked my pickup on a strip of grass next to my driveway, a strip I'd mowed, maintained, and treated as part of my yard for the past 6 years. I had never questioned that it belonged to my property. The letter insisted otherwise. According to the HOA, that patch of grass was association property, meaning every time I'd parked there, I'd supposedly been trespassing on common land. At first, I laughed. Then I reached the fine print. It warned that continued violations could eventually result in a lien being placed against my home. That was the moment I stopped laughing. I wasn't about to pay the fine without knowing exactly who actually owned that piece of land. So I called the HOA office, expecting someone to answer a simple ownership question. Instead, I was bounced from one extension to another until I finally reached the property manager, Denise. Without hesitation, she quoted a section of the community bylaws as though she'd memorized every word. All common areas, including but not limited to green spaces adjacent to private lots, are property of the association. One word immediately caught my attention. Common. Not owned. Just common. There was a difference, so I asked Denise for something much simpler. Can you send me the deed showing the HOA owns that strip? Silence. After several uncomfortable seconds, she finally admitted she'd need to speak with the legal department before getting back to me. She never did. That silence told me far more than any bylaw ever could. The very next day, I drove straight to the county records office. A records clerk pulled up the original subdivision plat, and within 10 minutes, everything I believed about my property changed completely. The grassy strip wasn't HOA-owned land. The original subdivision map from 1987 clearly identified it as a utility and access easement, a legal right-of-way created for a county water pipeline that had existed decades before the homeowners association was ever formed. Here's what many people don't realize. An easement doesn't transfer ownership of land. It only grants someone the legal right to use that land for a specific purpose. The actual ownership remains with whoever holds the title. According to the subdivision plat, that owner was me. My property's legal description extended nearly 3 feet farther than I'd always assumed, cutting directly through the very area the HOA insisted belonged to them. The association didn't own the land. They didn't even own the easement rights. At some point, someone had simply acted as though they controlled it, and homeowners had apparently been paying fines based on that assumption for years. I sat inside my truck in the county parking lot for nearly 10 minutes, staring at the map without saying a word. This is the point where everything changed. If you've ever dealt with an HOA pushing beyond its authority, pay close attention. For the next 2 weeks, I buried myself in county archives, property records, easement law manuals, and decades-old subdivision documents. What I discovered surprised even me. Easements aren't just lines drawn on old maps. Depending on how they're created and who currently holds the rights, they can sometimes be transferred, released, reassigned, or even purchased. In my county, the utility easement beneath that strip had effectively been abandoned back in 2009 after the Water Authority rerouted the pipeline elsewhere. Legally speaking, the easement rights had been left dormant. No one was actively exercising them. No one had formally claimed them. They were simply waiting for someone with legal standing to acquire them. Whoever eventually controlled those rights would also control how that strip could legally be used, including who had permission to park there. One night around 1 o'clock in the morning, I sat at my kitchen table reading state statutes on my laptop when, 90 days later, the letter finally arrived. My quiet title petition had been officially approved. No one had challenged it. Not the county, not the former Water Authority, and certainly not the HOA, which apparently never realized the filing window even existed. The same strip of grass they had cited me for parking on 11 different times was now, by law, permanently under my control. Let me explain exactly what that meant. I didn't simply own the land beneath the easement. I now possessed the actual easement rights that had once governed its use. That gave me the legal authority to decide who could enter it, drive across it, park on it, or otherwise use it, including the homeowners association itself if they ever needed to send maintenance vehicles, landscaping crews, or utility workers across that very strip. The irony was impossible to ignore. For years, the HOA had been policing my behavior using authority they never truly possessed. Now I held rights they actually depended on. The difference was, they had absolutely no idea until I chose to tell them. I printed 3 copies of the recorded documents. One stayed in my personal records. One went straight to my attorney. The third was reserved for the HOA's next board meeting. The following Wednesday evening, I walked into the clubhouse, took a seat in the 3rd row, and patiently listened through nearly 40 minutes of budget reports and committee updates before the board finally opened the floor for public comments. When my name was called, I stood up, held the county-recorded paperwork where everyone could see it, and calmly explained that the so-called common area they had been fining residents for using wasn't common property at all. It had always been a utility easement, and as of 81 days earlier, I was the officially recorded holder of those easement rights. The room fell completely silent. Even Denise, the property manager, slowly set her pen down and stared at the documents. Then I explained the part that truly changed the meeting. Every month, the HOA's landscaping contractor drove equipment across that exact strip to reach the underground sprinkler control box hidden beneath it. From that day forward, they would legally need my written permission every single time they wanted to use it. I wasn't interested in making their lives miserable. Instead, I offered a straightforward access agreement. They could continue using the easement at no cost. I only had one condition. Every parking fine issued for that strip during the previous 3 years had to be refunded in full, and the HOA had to amend its bylaws so they accurately reflected the property's legal status. The board didn't spend hours debating it. They voted just 17 minutes later. The decision was unanimous. No one sitting at that table wanted their attorney digging too deeply into how long the association had been enforcing a rule they never actually had the legal authority to enforce. About 3 weeks later, I received my refund check. By the time every homeowner who had been cited on that strip was reimbursed, the total exceeded $6,000. As it turned out, I wasn't the only person who had been paying for a mistake that should never have happened. Within a month, the HOA quietly rewrote its parking regulations. Denise never returned another one of my phone calls. Honestly, that alone felt like a small victory. But the biggest lesson stayed with me long after the money was refunded. That bright yellow envelope on my windshield wasn't just a violation notice. It was an invitation to ask a question that no one else had thought to ask. Does this HOA actually own the property it claims to own? In my case, the answer was no. And surprisingly, that grassy strip wasn't even the strangest discovery I made while digging through county records that year. Hidden inside the very same file was another document. That one involved a shared driveway, a forged signature, and a legal battle that made this entire fight seem almost simple. But that's a story for another day.